Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Smithsonian Staff Learning Series. My name is Adam Rozan, and I'm the Director of Programs Audience Development at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. I will be your host and moderator for today's talk. We are thrilled to have Natalie Summers with us today as our guest speaker. Natalie runs the creativity and educational programs at OpenAI and has an extensive background in social media and journalism. She will be sharing her insights on the groundbreaking AI technologies, ChatGPT and DALL-E 2, as well as discussing OpenAI's research on the American public's interest in AI and their concerns about it as well. Juices. I would also like to share that to write this introduction, I used ChatGPT, highlighting the capabilities of this incredible technology. Please remember that this program is taking place on Zoom and is being recorded with closed captions. Additionally, I'll be moderating the chat, so please feel free to add any questions you have for Natalie there. Without further ado, let's welcome Natalie Summers to the Smithsonian Staff Learning Series. Natalie, the floor is yours, and thank you again for joining us today.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Wonderful to meet you. Thank you for the introduction to you and to ChatGPT. Before I moved to California, I lived in DC for about 5 years and was a frequent visitor of the Smithsonian museums, and it has a special spot in my heart. I think I felt very lucky to be living in one of the only cities where you could go for a run and then end up at a zoo that you could just enter and experience some magical things right in your city. So anyway, close to my heart. As Adam said, I work at OpenAI on our education and creativity initiatives, and I'm going to step back a moment and just explain what OpenAI is, give a very brief primer on some just like what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about AI, like what are we actually building? And then I can show you some demos and explain a little bit about the products that we put out into the world, why we've put them out there, and what we are working on and what we can kind of expect to be coming from OpenAI or even other AI companies. So OpenAI was founded, I believe it was 7 years ago, or around 7 years ago, maybe it was 8. And initially it was started as a nonprofit, a small group of people who felt like in our lifetime, the most important thing that will happen, the most seismically changing thing that will happen to society is the development of very advanced artificial intelligence. And the concept of this is called AGI, you might see somewhere, artificial general intelligence. And what that just means is AI that is so sufficiently advanced that it can do things that right now only humans can do. And it does it at such a scale that it significantly disrupts the economy. So people come to work at OpenAI, especially when it was initially founded as this nonprofit, because they believe that AI is going to have significant advancements in our lifetime, and it must be done with safety and caution as a top priority over making a profit, especially in the short term, because there's so much that can go wrong in the development of this technology that if it's just left to straight up for profit companies, they're going to make short-term decisions about how to make AI that creates something that is the most interesting or makes you look at it the longest so that you can sell ads next to it. And there's lots of reasons why that type of structure could be challenging to trying to create this AI that's beneficial. So OpenAI was started as a nonprofit. The mission statement is build and deploy AGI that benefits all of humanity, which is a very lofty goal. And I don't think that anybody at OpenAI would say that they feel they have the answer about how to achieve that in the world. There's a lot of people, about 400 people now, that work at the company because they think it's an important problem to solve, and they are trying to figure out what they can bring to solve that problem. Okay, so that's kind of what is happening with what OpenAI is. I joined the company about 2 years ago because it was the middle of the pandemic, and as I think a lot of people felt, I was just thinking a lot about what my impact was in the world, and it was a scary time, and I wanted to try to find a mission-driven company to try to figure out where I could have a good impact. And my job that I came to work on is how do we make sure that when AI is developed, it gets to all different types of people, and lots of people are able to take advantage of it. And it's not just the people that are really in a specific niche of the tech world or adhere to a certain demographic that get to take all of the opportunities and define what AI should be for everybody else. And there's two sides of this. One is who gets to put feedback into what is safe and what is good AI. And the other side is, once it's created, how do we get it out to lots of people? So about a year ago now, April 6th, we launched a tool called DALL-E. And I'm going to share my slide for a moment here because I think DALL-E, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it. We'll just do a quick overview, is a great way to understand just more generally what we're talking about when we're talking about AI and what it means to put this AI out into the world. So I'm going to start with this. Can you guys see this slide? How do I just play it? Share. View slideshow. Okay. Can you see this? Cool. Thanks, Adam.
Yep.
Okay. So DALL-E is a artificial intelligence system that you give it words and it gives you back an image that has never existed before. And the way that this works is we trained an AI model by showing it hundreds of millions of images and their captions. And then the model understood the associations between the words and what was actually in the image. And now, you know what, actually, let me stop sharing this and I'm just going to go share a demo screen because I think that's actually a better way to do this. Let's see. Okay. Chrome. Oh, I see. I've opened this in Chrome and that's why all of my things are kind of missing here. Okay. So, sorry, folks, give me just a second. Okay. Share my screen. DALL-E. Okay. So here is the model that I'm going to kind of use to give you a bigger explanation of AI. So DALL-E, this is what it looks like. You type in words. I'm going to say a 3D render of a fluffy dog wearing sunglasses in a blue room. So what's going to happen is the model is going to receive this prompt and it's going to be thinking, what is a 3D render? What is a dog? What's a fluffy dog? If this fluffy dog is a 3D render, what does that mean for how the dog looks? What breed of dog is fluffy? And then if it's wearing sunglasses, is there going to be fur in front of or behind the sunglasses? If it's in a blue room, what even is the concept of a room? Does the room have walls? How many light sources usually come into a room? And what does that mean for how the dog should be lit? DALL-E saw hundreds of millions of these images and understands a lot of the nuances in the patterns of the data that it saw. So what DALL-E is not doing is an advanced image search of all the images it's ever seen and pulling a dog here and pulling a blue room here. It's understanding these concepts that when it saw all of its training data, it encoded as numbers in its memory, and it's creating something completely new. So let's see it here. 3D render, oh no, invalid model provided. I wonder if it's down. You know what? Let me go to my history of where I've done this a few times. Let's see if we can see an example here of what it would have generated had it been up. The model's been down a bit lately because let me see. We're going to pull up a different example. Sorry, 1 second. I'm going to message the team and let them know that it's down. Here's the other thing that I will share with you is that right now, OpenAI has shared ChatGPT with the world, which means there is unprecedented interest in what we are doing in all of our models. Because last year we put DALL-E out to the world, and then in the very end of last year and into this year, we put out ChatGPT, which is a text-to-text chatbot that has really taken off because of how easy it is to just engage with something over text. And since that took off at the end of last year, our company has kind of been in a new position where we're understanding that way more people understand artificial intelligence and are interested in using it. And we want to make sure we're taking advantage of the opportunity to get information about how advanced AI is to the world. And so now we're trying to figure out how to support all these models. But this unprecedented interest means that right now, a lot of times when you go in to explore with these models, they might be down. And that's because OpenAI started as a nonprofit that was not intending to be putting products into the world as its main focus. And it still isn't our main focus, but we're trying to make sure that we don't lose this opportunity to educate as many people as possible now that we have this widespread interest. Okay. I'm going to see while the team gets back to me about if I can hop onto a different server to demonstrate that model. But I want to just quickly give an overview of what we're talking about when we're talking about AI models. So usually I like to give this demonstration in front of my bookshelf, and you can just picture that I have maybe 400 books on my bookshelf. That is when I'm in my living room. And what you could do with an AI model is train it by showing it all of the books on your bookshelf. And then if you were to ask the AI model, complete this sentence, a girl walked up the blank, the model would understand what the most likely word should be to come next in that sentence based on everything it learned by reading everything on my bookshelf. And that's what AI models are. They're prediction machines. So you give them a lot of information and then they output what they think is most likely based on all that information you provided. So DALL-E, which you can't see right now, is taking all the understanding it has about how words connect to visuals and is predicting what image you would like. This made up model that I'm describing to you that's trained on my bookshelf is going to complete the sentences based on its understanding of all the other times it saw those words. What is a girl? If someone is walking up, what does up mean as a preposition and what types of things might somebody walk up? And then it's going to complete that sentence for you. So while the model is very good at discerning what should come next based on the data, there's an inherent problem here in assuming that this model is going to be very useful to everyone. My bookshelf is specific to my interests. Almost everything on my bookshelf is written in English. I like fiction, so there's a good deal of information in there that is not historically accurate, and it might be hard for the model to understand which books are telling the truth and which are fictional. So if I were to ask the model a question, it might not have accurate information in that data. I think I have a pretty diverse group of authors, but it's all in English, so probably there's a certain number of countries' authors that are represented. All of these things are really important to keep in mind because AI models are only really able to predict what it is that you've trained them on. So what companies like OpenAI do is they train models on this type of data, and then they have something called weights where they go in and they tell the model what to value, how much, and where there might be a weakness in what that data is. And a very important part of the safety and alignment work that OpenAI does is focused on this. How can we ethically get data that we can train on that's really representative of a lot of people in the world? And how can we then best understand a lot of different experiences out in the world and pull the weights in the models to give the safest and most aligned experience? So what you would have seen had I been able to show you DALL-E right now is we could ask the model for an image of happiness. And if DALL-E gave us back an image of a child in a field playing with a puppy in the sunlight, that's a pretty good idea that that model understands someone's version of happiness. Obviously not everybody. Some people aren't dog people and someone might easily get sunburned. So we can't assume that it's true for everybody, but we can agree that that's an aligned take on happiness. We can see how it got there. If we asked for happiness and it gave us humans chained in a basement to computers who were starving and freezing, we would know that that is not the version of happiness that we have collectively agreed on as what it is that we want for ourselves as humans. So when we create models like DALL-E or like ChatGPT, we do the best that we can do to get data that we think will allow the model to make safe and aligned. Alignment is just how accurate to happiness is the output of this model. How well is the model doing what people actually want? So we need to get the appropriate data. Then we need to train the model in a way and put the weights in the model in a way that help it understand what is and isn't what a human would want it to do. And then we have to recognize that there's 400 people that work at OpenAI. Most of them work out of a San Francisco-based headquarters. A great deal of them went to college. Many of them have taken some type of life path that have brought them to work in tech, which is a homogenous group within itself. So should these people be able to be the ones that are discerning exactly what is and isn't aligned? We need much more feedback from many other people to feel safe about those types of efforts. So when we put DALL-E out into the world, we did that because by letting the general public use DALL-E and give a thumbs up for things they liked or flag if things were biased or unsafe or unaligned, we could get a much more diverse and representative swath of humanity, helping us understand what is dangerous about our models. And the company's goal is to be conservative, not politically conservative, but just cautious conservative, with all of our models to reduce as much harm as possible, but that we need to get them out to the world so that we can learn quickly what is harmful to people that aren't able to be represented in the room as they're creating these models. So ChatGPT was launched last year. It's a chatbot. And we put it out there because we wanted to get this type of safety feedback for a new model that we just released last week, GPT-4. It's the GPT series of models are models where you give them text and they give you back text, unlike DALL-E where you give it text and it gives you back an image. And before we released this much more powerful version of GPT, we wanted more data to understand these safety risks. And when people engage with ChatGPT and they flag that something isn't good, or they share feedback that something was great, our teams are researching all of that feedback to understand changes that need to be made for the models overall to be more safe and aligned. So that's just the kind of TLDR on what we're talking about when we're talking about AI and what these two public-facing products that OpenAI has are. But OpenAI is working on a lot of other things, including a model called Whisper, where you can give it audio and it can give you a transcript. It understands a lot of different dialects and it can hear through like background noise in different languages. We're also working on basically any modality you can imagine. You can give Codex text and it will write you code of what you're asking. If you're not someone that's a developer, if you're a developer, it can help you more efficiently write code. You could picture though, if there's a way to describe something and then get an output in a different modality, like give it text, get back photo or video or animation or audio, we have teams researching how to do that, because where you can find data, you can train a model to be able to input natural language and output something that is similar to that data, so long as you have sufficient data for it to be trained on. So there's a couple things that I have been excited when I've talked with some museums about. First, they want to understand how all of this AI is working, because it is confusing and it feels like a black box from the outside, and it can feel hard to understand and how to guess what is next and how quickly things will be moving in AI. And they're moving very, very rapidly. But the best way that I tend to orient people is try to imagine that if you have a ton of data, you could probably give it to a model and have that model do a really good job at predicting what it is that you would like based on that data. A couple examples that I had thought of for museums, and you can maybe just use your imagination here, is you could, for example, Adam, I think I said this to you, you could, I'm just going to go back to the Smithsonian Zoo for a moment. Outside of the lion exhibit, I was there when the lions had babies. So like 2015, I don't remember when that was. You could go up to that exhibit. This tech isn't there right now, but it's soon. You could have a little box where you spoke into the box and you asked a question like, what did this lion have for breakfast? And AI could take that audio, transcribe it, understand from the audio, probably how old is this person who is asking the question. They could also tell what language is this person asking the question in. And then the model would be able to ingest that information, check against data that you guys have, and maybe the history of these lions or all the animals in the zoo or all of the information that there is to be had, figure out the best way in a chat to interact with this person based on their age and the level of their question, and then reply in a voice that was recorded with a small snippet of a human voice acting out a character to say whatever the response to that information would be. And it would be using a model that maybe OpenAI or another AI company had created that facilitated the chat, but your information that you have about what is relevant in your exhibit or in your museum could be fed specifically into AI to help people engage with your exhibits. And I use that example because I think it shows a number of things that can happen here. AI can be used to take questions and help reply to questions. It can synthesize information and figure out how to serve it to people that are coming in. You could also ask the model to create a video or a photo asset that would be appropriate to help somebody envision something. Somebody at a museum and they were asking about if someone is at a plane, could they use an AI model to describe what that user, that person visiting the museum, might like to see as they look down out of the plane? Like, where in the world would they like to be flying over? And then an AI model would be able to generate the image that could be underneath the plane, and the person could look out at the screen and be able to see what it might be like to be flying over that place. So those are all kind of vague and rough estimates, but I'm just trying to give like a basic understanding of what our company is creating, what AI tools are available and what is coming soon and how functionally I see them fitting into real work and real human experiences. There's also a tremendous number of ethical concerns about every twist and turn that AI is taking right now. So that is a broad setup. Haven't heard back about if this model is up. So maybe we could pop to some questions and just see which direction everyone would like to learn more about.
That's great. Well, thank you for that primer, and very helpful, and appreciate your example. Folks, do start using the questions. Let me just kick off one while people have a chance to put in some things. Can you give us any insight from what you all have learned now that DALL-E is out there, that ChatGPT, what you've learned about audiences and how they're using it, maybe about demographics? Excuse the dog barking.
Sorry, I heard, can I give examples of, and then the dog was the featured audio. Okay, I think that what you're asking is some examples of how people are using what we've learned from just the usage from DALL-E specifically. So right now, so my job was, again, figure out how to get AI tools to people that don't usually have them. So when we launched DALL-E, it was really clear to us, let's start with artists, because artists are in every community, and artists and educators are the two that really stick out in my mind. And that's why I was excited at the chance to connect with you all, because I think that Smithsonian does this, straddles these two very important roles in society in helping people understand the world around them through art, storytelling, and just education. And so what we decided with DALL-E was, let's make sure we get it to artists first, because this is going to be a transformative technology. When we started with DALL-E, I was reaching out to artists, asking them, would you like to try something new? Here's how this would work. And no one wanted to, because it didn't exist yet. And they had no idea exactly what I was talking about. Now there's a lot more interest, but our goal was get it to artists first, focus on a diverse group of artists that are in every town and city in the world across all, maybe they're potters, or maybe they're computer graphic designers, maybe they are dancers or choreographers. Get this tool to all of them and find out how they'll use it and find out what they're worried about, because they're going to be able to tell the most diverse swath of humanity about these tools and help educate them. And also, they're the ones who are going to see their disruption coming to their industries first. So if we can hear from them about what they're worried about, then we can build policies around our tools and models that can try to help them, because we are not going to be able to stop the development of AI. It is going to be not just OpenAI in general, but there are many companies developing AI, and there are many countries that are developing AI. And the way that OpenAI feels is, if we're able to have a very uniquely structured company, it started as a nonprofit, and once we realized that we needed significantly more resources to be able to power the AI models, it became a capped profit company governed by a nonprofit. So the decisions about what we research and what is safe to release, that's governed by a nonprofit. Because of this unique company structure, we feel like we're able to not need to prioritize just getting the thing out there that'll make us the most money, because the company isn't structured on trying to like sell usage of DALL-E to allow everybody to retire early. It's a unique company structure in that way.
Yeah. Should we get to some of the questions?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was going to explain the DALL-E bit. Go ahead. Okay.
We have a question here from Mark. Why can't the training data for ChatGPT include whether a source is fact, opinion, fiction, or unknown? And he says, a user shouldn't be able to convince a ChatGPT that 2 + 2 = 5.
Totally. So right now there's a couple things here. So ChatGPT, as it is right now, isn't giving you sources for what it is working on. And that's because it's trained on data and it's making its best guess of what's coming next. And we, at the time of launching ChatGPT, were working on this, but the model is just predicting what it thinks should come next based on the data that it was trained on. So there's lots of incorrect information out there. And there are different ways moving forward that we're going to try to be solving this problem. One is something we launched today, which is plugins, which allows DALL-E to access a third party, or allows a third party app. Let's just say like a news publisher, or maybe the Smithsonian could maybe even have one. And then I, as a user of ChatGPT, let's say the Smithsonian decided to have this, could say to ChatGPT, hey, can you check with the Smithsonian about, or like, give me some information about this. And if I know I want to have a valid source, I could ask it to plug into a source that I trust. But right now, at the early stage that we put ChatGPT out in, we knew that it was not going to have all of the correct information. We try to have it explain that it is not necessarily going to have all the correct information. Over time, that will improve, but it's going to be very important that society generally develops a muscle to understand that, just like when we started seeing headlines of news that was not true, we all kind of needed to adjust our understanding of, when you see something online, how true should you assume it is? We're all going to need to understand that as AI develops, there's going to be a gap between accuracy. A user shouldn't be able to convince ChatGPT that 2 + 2 = 5 in a thread. So the ChatGPT is serving the function of being a prediction machine and replying to people with its best guess. If a user would like to try to convince it to do something, or try to convince it of something that is wrong, what we as a company, and I think also as society in general, need to decide is, what should the function of these chat bots be? I think the math example is a pretty good one of, like, we want it to be good at math, and maybe it has some weaknesses in math that we're working on. But also in general, if you want an AI model to talk with you about a certain thing that somebody else doesn't like or doesn't agree with, should you be able to? And where does the responsibility lie, either on the AI companies work, whether OpenAI or someone else, to place a lot of guardrails around something like ChatGPT? And where should ChatGPT be able to behave in a way that's dictated by the user? And someone gave me an example of one school of thought is thinking of ChatGPT and using it like a library. And how do we allow ChatGPT to have as much information as possible and allow people to come in and seek information? And how is that different than ChatGPT pushing very dangerous information to people? So for example, if you go into a library and you really want to learn how to, like, steal a car, you could find that information if you worked hard to find it. But that is different than someone at the museum, like, popping out and saying, hey, you should go and steal a car right now, or pushing this dangerous information out there. And that's an ethical conversation that needs to happen. And people need to decide what should be up to the user and what should be up to the AI company to determine. And then if it's up to the AI company, whose morals and ethics should that be aligned to, if this is really a tool that's going to be used internationally? But the smaller answer right now to this is just that we need to weight information to ChatGPT to explain what is and isn't real. And it was trained on a lot of information, some of it conflicting and some of it not representative of what we want it to do. So when we see issues where it is surfacing bad information and telling the audience that it is true, that is a problem. But if somebody goes in and says, I want you to operate as though this is true, so tell me, act as though this is true, there's still some discussion to be had about how the model should behave in that way. Like, what is actually best for humanity in this case? And I don't know that we know exactly yet.
Great. There's a couple questions around this. So this is a colleague, Pino. I'm going to summarize. He's using ChatGPT for different kinds of functions. And then he says, my teammates and senior leadership are skeptical about the approach. Any suggestions on how to address this? So the usage of ChatGPT in one's work. And then I'm going to bundle this with our colleague, Claire Jerry, who asks, she's not worried about ChatGPT taking over their functions. What advice would you share between the role of the expert, the professional, and how to use ChatGPT or DALL-E as a tool?
Yeah, this is such an interesting quandary at the moment. So I've been doing a couple talks with, like, college professors and higher education, and there was a lot of initial concern around ChatGPT. Like, could students be using it to cheat? And now there's conversations in Hollywood, like, should we allow screenplays that are written by AI or in part with AI? And I want to validate that it's really scary to have technology come and present a disruption to an industry. And that is scary because forging a path ahead is confusing and the answers aren't here yet. But it feels sometimes to me like we are getting distracted by this idea that we might be able to pause this type of development. When we think about ChatGPT is a more advanced use of some AI that we're already using, like when you search the internet for some type of information, or when you use spell check. These are all technologies that we have adopted, and we've changed our understanding of how everybody else is probably operating. We haven't changed our understanding yet with ChatGPT. And I understand that a lot of institutions are not sure how to allow it to be used for a few reasons. One, sometimes the information it surfaces is not accurate. Two, how does it understand this information? And is the data that it was trained on, was that, and this is specifically a question we get a lot with DALL-E, was that ethically collected and used? And if we are, let's say, using DALL-E to create an image to put on a poster to showcase and use an exhibit, or maybe it's the images I was using in the example of being in the plane and like looking down. These are the two kind of areas that I find I get the questions about. And DALL-E was trained on all public or licensable images. So you are able to, as the user, know that you can use that image, you can monetize it, you own it as the creator. But it is important to be realistic that the idea of your information being in a data set isn't something that everybody generally understands really well. People don't read the terms and conditions and privacy notices on every social media platform they join. So for example, if you're someone that uses Reddit, you might not understand that everything you post onto Reddit can sell in a data set. And Twitter, anything you tweet can be sold in a data set. So there's going to need to be a bigger conversation societally around privacy and data and what we understand to be ours and what we understand to be something that we are putting in a place that is then someone else's to sell and someone else's to buy. So that bigger question, which is, I don't know what we should do with these models as a company because I don't legally understand how it's going to shake out with what training data is about. That is not a question that I've got a great answer to you for, because it's going to take a while for the law to catch up. And we're going to need AI companies to be really diligent about making plans about how they get data in ways that they think are ethical and are going to be in line with the law once it is developed. And AI is developing faster than the government processes to figure out regulating it. The other point, though, around people not wanting ChatGPT to be used because they are concerned about information coming in that their employees did not create just on their own. This is something that I think is going to have to go away with time, because it is a tool that everyone is going to be able to use. My husband runs a technology company and manages a team of software engineers. And after Codex came out, which is, just think of ChatGPT, but you can have it write code. His engineers asked, like, are you going to fire us all and just use this to write the code? And his answer was no, but I'm not hiring you to write as much code. I'm hiring you to be a master of the best tools available to you to make sure our code is as good as possible. And ChatGPT is going to be a tool that can be used in a lot of different ways, like searching the internet, like a lot of other types of tools. But right now, it's really hard to say to someone, just get on board and figure out how to take advantage of the best tools, because eventually you're going to have to, if people aren't ready for that, they're not ready for that. But I try to bring examples like how a painter must have felt when the camera was invented and how the photographers must have felt when iPhone got a really great camera. These are all developments that more equitably distribute access to information and tools. And now lots of people could do something that maybe only one person could do before. And we have to decide, do we really want to keep the opportunity to participate based on the people that have the access to that education and resources, or should we find a way to empower more people with these types of tools? And I think we're going to lean toward the latter eventually, but right now we're in this fearful place.
I want to acknowledge lots of folks are putting great comments and questions into the chat. Please keep them coming. If you do have examples and articles and books to reference, please do that. That's really great. Skipping around a little bit in case you don't hear me ask your question. But there is one here I like that is interesting. Like, can you talk a little bit about, in terms of education, shouldn't the biases and problems in training be featured more prominently when announcing AI products? People have no idea how these tools are trained and what problems they are and will cause. Thank you for that question, and please keep them coming.
Yeah, so I think that actually that isn't true entirely. If you look on the web, OpenAI, I can only speak to OpenAI, but when we put a model out, we spend a ton of time talking about all of the weaknesses and where we do not think that the model is good and where we're concerned about like the accuracy. But in general, most people are not going to OpenAI's website and reading the blog post to understand. So one of the things that we need to figure out doing and are actively trying is getting that information out to the public about what should you be concerned about? Where is this at right now? But the reality is, once the news comes out and once we put out a blog post like that, the bits that are going to be interesting to the most people and how to boil this down to be as simple as possible aside from the media outlets that decide to do a deep dive, those are the things that will dominate the headlines. And people will want to play with something that seems easy. And a lot of these concerns and limitations that are highlighted in the papers that go alongside with all of our models and our blog posts, they just are not in the public conversation the same way that the wow and fear of like, oh my gosh, this is a big change is basically.
Yeah. Wayne asked a question, and I think it's an interesting one. Something I've experienced, which is, he uses the thing about asking for jokes. What's the percentage between a funny joke and a dud joke? And can you talk a little bit about that in terms of, are people getting what they want out of it, and where is that in the process in terms of that success to kind of complication ratio, which I think goes back to audiences. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you all at OpenAI are learning about different demographics, different usages, even examples, let's say from seniors versus college students versus academics, even museum professionals. We love some examples there. And in terms of what are the kinds of ways that you're hearing that maybe are outside of what we hear in the news, and then circle back to, of course, to Wayne's question around jokes versus funny ones versus not so funny ones.
Right. So this is kind of going back to like alignment in general. Like jokes, is a joke funny is a really like great example of a very hard problem to solve, because it's a lot of people have a lot of different thoughts about that. A way that comedy might show up in training data would be that there might be a joke or a comedy. Let's just say that there is an author whose information is in the public domain somehow, and they wrote a bunch of books, and then people wrote articles that are also available in the training data that talk about this person being the funniest person ever. The model's going to understand who in general, based on the training data, is funny and the way that they talk and why that might be funny. When you're giving a prompt, if you just say, hey, ChatGPT, give me a joke, it's going to sound like a very boring HR professional's best guess at predicting what a joke is based on the limited context you gave it. But if you say to ChatGPT, I'm about to go into my third grader's classroom and I want to tell a joke, it's got to be about hot air balloons, and David Sedaris is one of my favorite authors, like give me something that's going to make me the most cool parent in the world in this third grade classroom. The model is going to have so much more information to give you an output that is valid to what it is that you're asking. So questions of what is and isn't the funniest, some of that is going to be us hearing from people who were like, I asked for a joke, this joke was bad. And we'll see if there's anything we can learn from that training, that data, that feedback we're getting from people. But likely something like that is so subjective, it's going to be something that we allow people to then come to the prompt with more from themselves to describe what they think is funny and to get a joke with a little bit more input from their side. But if we take a different step, and instead of asking for something that is funny, we ask for, I just want to kind of go into like the data representation thing, which I think I need to take a far step away from jokes to get to. Let's just talk about, there are AI models right now that can take in and look at visuals. So GPT-4, which we announced last week, feels like 7 years ago, you can not just ask it for a question, you can give it an image of what is in your fridge and say, hey, what should I cook for dinner? And it will reply to you and tell you based on the ingredients, because it can see and discern what's in that image. So that type of technology, and I'm not speaking about OpenAI's technology right now, but there is a technology that's also quite good at reading like mammograms and determining if something is the matter with them. So let's just think about that technology, OpenAI, whatever company aside. There's a technology that's good at looking at images of mammograms and discerning if something is the matter, better than the human eye. So what if we decide to start using that tool in hospitals to better determine breast cancer risk? Great, if you are someone that was very well represented in that data set. But what if we realize that actually only European countries were in that data set? Then there are entire continents worth of people whose medical systems have shifted to be reliant on an assumption, a prediction that has nothing to do with them and their bodies, and they are not represented. So what is this other challenge that AI companies have right now is understanding what can we learn is missing in our data set? What do we not know is missing? And by the world using our data set and giving us feedback, when we were launching DALL-E, I had some Japanese artists reach out and say, like, this is a famous style of art in Japan that we cannot get DALL-E to do. And I shared it with the research team and they were like, oh, wow, we need to see if there's a way where we can license or buy training data that will make this more useful to that region in the world. but we need a lot of feedback points to understand where the gaps are. And there needs to be internal teams at these companies that are not waiting for the world to say, I am at risk of not being caught for breast cancer now because nobody considered me in the data. There need to be teams that are really actively thinking about diversity and inclusion in data sets. And there need to be mechanisms in place for people to be able to flag in a meaningful way early on in the process when they are seeing that their experience is excluded. Because when it gets to be powerful enough to replace some of these systems, we are going to want everybody to be represented so that it can be used as well as possible. So that's a bit of a pivot from the joke, but it's kind of the same idea of different people's perspectives needing to be represented.
Yeah. Two questions. Is there at this point in time a governing body in the states that's thinking about AI, and is there some form of AI detector that you could actually see whether the content, written, visual, or other, came out of AI? So there's two questions.
Yeah. So the first is that the reality is governing this stuff is going to come to the government. OpenAI is a part of there are different groups of companies that are developing AI, that are putting together boards for responsible AI or are trying to align on what should the shared standards be. But even with the best of intentions, if it's just the AI companies that are aligning on what they think should be the standards without other input from other sectors across the world, that is going to be a biased set of priorities that everybody aligns on. So I know OpenAI has a government affairs team that's meeting with governments, showing them all of this technology, explaining to them what's possible, answering their questions so that they can understand what's coming to regulate. And in the meantime, I think we need to hope that in OpenAI's charter, like the company's mission, it says, if OpenAI is no longer appearing to be the first company to make this AGI, this advanced AI, we will stop trying to build AI and go with the front runner to help them with safety. So we're hoping, and our one of the leaders of the company has shared like a hope that other companies will adopt a similar type of structure where we really recognize that there are some safety priorities that need to be baked in to the foundation of how your company is run in order to make sure that we are regulating this in a way that is actually fair and beneficial to people. But there isn't something that is locked in and that we can rest easy about. We need to be voting in officials that are going to do a good job of understanding this and push this information out and make it something that people are talking about, because AI is shaping the world and there is room to have and be a part of conversations about what AI should look like and how it should be governed. And I think one of the reasons I took this job is because I feel like the more people we can educate about this is where AI is now, the more people are going to get to be a part of those conversations. And then we will have regulation that is what we want it to be, versus regulation that is absent and then there's danger, or regulation that is way too intense and stops advancement. And then other people with more malicious intent, whether it be countries or companies or whatever, are able to move forward, and then their AI becomes the widely used AI that has less safety in place. So there's a lot of importance for it to be accurately regulated.
And the second question was, is there any detector out there, a program, or are you developing that would detect? Yeah.
So this is people are interested in this, and here's my thoughts on this. OpenAI has worked on, in response to, in a large way, educators being concerned about plagiarism, ways that we can try to help people put something in and see if it's been created by an AI system. However, OpenAI is not the only company that is going to be creating these AI systems. So let's say DALL-E, for example, if you wanted to see if something was created by DALL-E, we might be able to help check and see if it was, but it would not be true to assume that we can check and see if any other AI tool made it. And when it comes to something like text outputs from ChatGPT or any other like of the GPT models, those texts could be then changed slightly. And there's a lot of other things that could happen that would make a detector less efficient. And I think that when I hear questions about how will we be able to tell if something has been written by AI, I think to the future, when we ask how will we be able to tell if something was like spell checked or written using a computer versus a typewriter, like these are going to be nuances that we need to detect less, because we will adapt to assume that people are kind of using these tools more often. And I think in the meantime, as people are looking for ways to tell if it was written by AI, we are going to have a lot of frustration when people think they have a tool. Even if OpenAI were to develop a tool, there's a chance that a model in the future would not be able to be tracked in this way, or that you might assume as an average user that you're checking all AI based things. What if it was made with Bing, or what if it was made with Google's new model? All of these things. So people are working on them. And I think that the problem that will solve is not the bigger problem that we should be trying to solve, not we as a company, but just as society thinking about. When I was in this group of professors that was saying, how can we change our tests? Should we like make sure that we like, if essay writing isn't going to be something that our students can do, maybe we need to like, how do we give them a different type of quiz that doesn't allow them to use this? And one of the other professors in the room was like, we need to change how we think about what we need to teach our students and how they can use these tools and how they can be educated about when they're seeing something that is written by these tools versus trying to fight against it. We should fight to shape it to what we want, but trying to isolate it is not where it's going.
Let's build off of that. And this is partly in line with one of the questions. I wonder if you can share some types of ways that you all at OpenAI are seeing how different ways that people are using ChatGPT. Can you share some types of examples in addition to the student one, which I think we all understand and have read the headlines? Are there other ways you can highlight and share anecdotes of how people are using the technology in new and different ways? And then we'll get to some of the other ones. That'd be great.
Yeah. So ChatGPT has, DALL-E is helping people that do not have time or resources to create visuals in a lot of ways. I'm just going to start with that one because it's I can do it a bit quickly. But we have a lot of folks who are like set designers in Hollywood who want to create art for their sets, but don't have the photo of the person or don't have the house looking that way because it's not a real thing that's existed, using DALL-E to create images to put onto their sets. Lots of people are using DALL-E to create images to sell in some way or to use as marketing materials. With ChatGPT, we have companies that are basically using ChatGPT, which is a advanced chatbot, and then they're telling ChatGPT a bunch of information about their company and allowing ChatGPT to be the Q&A service, because ChatGPT gets information to all their knowledge of maybe everything about their company, everything on their website that's public. And then instead of searching through a Q&A page, which with Control F on my computer, I could ask a chatbot, hey, what do you think is the matter with this item that I've purchased? And then ChatGPT could serve an answer based on being given this special information. We have a lot of people that are using it for educational use cases like tutoring. And this is an interesting thing because the people, and a lot of it is happening not in the US, that are using ChatGPT as a tutor or to help understand information are blazing a trail of being tutored with an understanding that this AI tool isn't always going to be accurate. So there's this like getting the information, understanding it, and then checking it and triangulating it elsewhere to be sure that the information's right. Hopefully AI or ChatGPT can get sufficiently better at being accurate much faster and also can cite its sources, which will make it even more useful as a tutor. Codex is amazing because, and I think you can experience this within ChatGPT, you can talk about an idea with ChatGPT, ask it to write some code or feed it some code that you've written, and ChatGPT can participate with you in creating better code. I decided to teach myself how to code last year. And whenever I would get stuck, I would pop into ChatGPT. I wrote this code and it's not working. What's going on? And it would write back and it'd be like, well, it looks like in this line you had a slash where you needed an equal sign. And then it would give me some jargon. And I was like, you are talking to me as though I'm someone that already knows how to code. Please tell me in much more elementary language what is the matter here in a way I can carry forward. And it met me there and explained it. So I think there's a lot of that type of people using it as though they had another imperfect colleague with them to bounce ideas off of. But then companies are also using it to create a special engagement experience with customers, specially crafted around the information that they want the customers to understand.
Those are great examples. I appreciate it. I wonder if you can comment a little bit more around, is there an age barrier for the usage? And then can you talk a little bit about the two different things? So is there an age barrier, what you are seeing? And can you talk about how the company and ChatGPT and DALL-E are thinking and dealing with diversity in terms of the content, in terms of representation and the data sets?
Yeah. So let me just start with the second question because it's front of mind here. So I think DALL-E is a really great example of this because you can literally look at the image and understand how diverse it is. And so let's just go back to my bookshelf example. Let's just say instead of words in those books, it's just photos that author took to tell their story. Those photos are going to be, I read a lot of women authors, so there's probably going to be a lot of photos of women and from their perspective in particular, and again, all in English. So, and if the photos are all taken by people that are authors, not photographers, there will be a certain type of image. Another kind of interesting example here is there's a, you all might be more familiar with this because it's in like the museum gallery space, but I believe there is an indigenous either an exhibit or a photographer in particular that's trying to communicate that the way that Native American people were represented in photography was not very representative of their culture, and it was representative of the mostly white photographers that were coming in to photograph the Native American people as they wanted to see them. So those are the photos that are in our data set about how we understand these people and these cultures, and even if we have somebody represented, the way they were captured in that data is not necessarily going to be the way that is accurate to it is a piece of data that is imperfect because it's staged. And there's all of this that needs to be considered. So when you ask the model to give you an image of a doctor, most likely those photos will be of white men in a white coat, like looking and smiling or standing over a table, because that's probably what most of the images are. But when we're doing these weights and the additional work to the model, we're talking about what do we want the output to be? Do we want it to be mostly men? Do we want it to have lots of, are there doctors of every race and ethnicity? And if so, how do we make sure that that the model understands that doctors are not all white men, even though the photos seem to make it seem that way in the data set? And there are a few things that happen. One is seeking out more data that shows the things that we know are absent. The next is something that is a bit controversial. DALL-E, when you ask it for something, if you don't like specify a race or a gender, it will append on the back end. You put in your prompt, it asks the model to give you a diverse group of people and to show different. So your outputs will have like 4 different options of 4 different types of people. And that's because the design has asked it to input more diversity to better match the world and not to better match the data set. And the reason that we knew that needed to happen is because somebody somewhere in the process knew to say, it doesn't seem right that mostly white men are the thing that come up when you ask for a doctor. And that meant diversity needed to be in the room to ask the question, different life experience to build the model, the data needed to be looked at with this critical eye. And then that's a glaring example, but there's much smaller things like this understanding of how, if you are asking for in Native American representation in an image, how do we tell if what we have in the data set is accurate and aligned to what we want that output to be? And how do we make sure the right people are involved in that conversation? Right now, we are thinking a lot about getting the AI tools just to people to use, because right in the user interface, you can flag if something is the matter or something is biased or dangerous, and that goes to the team. But a lot of it needs to happen with recruiting to actually work on the company also. And there will need to be standards in place by governing bodies so that issues like what we were talking about with mammograms cannot exclude a certain person. We're going to need there to be thresholds that hold the companies accountable externally, in addition to what they put up internally.
That's great. I'm going to try to do 3 questions quickly. Is OpenAI continuing to add to the data set, or is it stopped? Can you talk a little bit about attributions to images, whether to DALL-E or ChatGPT, so people can know where things are coming from? And let's just start there.
Sure.
If we have time for one more.
So today we announced something called plugins. And so back yesterday, when you were using ChatGPT, its data set was trained to 2021, I believe. So if you were to ask it a question about something, it might respond to you with some outdated information. And then it would say to you, the last information I have is from this year or whatever. But with plugins, ChatGPT, or user will be able to access the internet using ChatGPT or access specific third-party companies. So again, this example of kind of being able to chat like with the Smithsonian through a plugin. Those are the reason that ChatGPT just doesn't automatically connect to the internet is a safety issue. It's really hard to look at all of the data and figure out what is accurate and what is risky. And so an ever evolving massive information is very hard to stay on top of. Let's just use Reddit for an example. I don't know if any of you guys use that Reddit, but it is not a place where everybody is kind to each other and the things that people are saying are appropriate to say out into the world. But let's just say that there was an AI model trained using Reddit data, and maybe some weights were included to try to make it less like racist and scary and dangerous. Although Reddit has done a tremendous amount to clean up Reddit. If people are still able to post to that forum and the model is in real time training itself and able to access that data, we will need mechanisms in place to be able to in real time understand if that data is risky or unaligned, or if it's going to inform the model of some information that is incorrect. So the plugin solution is allowing for more control in that way. But already starting today, it's not available to everyone. We're rolling it out slowly and iteratively to try to reduce risk and harm and learn as much as we can. But it's already going to be able to get access to the internet. The key is figuring out how to do that in a way that doesn't fundamentally change the model's understanding of a lot of information, and instead lets the model know you are crossing a threshold into the internet, which here are the inherent risks that come with that.
Great. And we'll just go here. Can you talk more about how OpenAI is thinking about attribution to specific sources?
Yes. So for DALL-E, this is complicated because DALL-E is not something where we can't look at a DALL-E image and say, okay, here are all of the images that that model is using to inform its understanding of what this image should be. DALL-E does not have access to the images in its data sets. So when you get a new image, we know that it's never going to replicate something that is exactly seen in its data set. So it's not an image that exists. It won't replicate a human face that it's seen. It's giving you all completely something new, but that means we can't sort out, okay, this photo in this data set was a part of this understanding. ChatGPT is different, especially now with this idea of being able to access the internet and with plugins. The hope is for people are always going to need, now more than ever, someone to tell them what information is legit and what is not legit. And it's going to come to journalists and storytellers and institutions of truth to be the thing that people are going to want to check with. So our goal is to figure out the way that we can have ChatGPT explain and what sources it's gotten information from. That's different than DALL-E because it is looking more directly at information versus pulling from and no longer available data set that it has access to, if that makes sense. So I think it's going to mean creating opportunities for other companies and sources of truth to be able to serve information in the model in a way that they're able to monetize and share credit for. But in the meantime, ChatGPT being able to link and explain where it's gotten information from, you can see this in Bing already, I think. That's probably where it will evolve to. But we're trying to solve the problem about how to do that best and then how to compensate people whose information is reflected in these sources, because that's an important part too.
Well, that might be a great place to end today's talk, because that's clearly a role for the Smithsonian as a trusted source and as the nation's museums. So I would like to thank you again, Natalie, for today's presentation, for your comment and helping us understand OpenAI, DALL-E, and ChatGPT, and answering the questions of my colleagues. And again, thank you very much for joining us from San Francisco. And we appreciate your time today.
Great
and thank you all for joining.
Sorry our models are down, but I hope you get to check them out. And if you've got any questions, Adam, maybe send me an email with anything I didn't get to. And it was an honor to talk with you guys. Huge fan. You guys are doing something really important.
Absolutely.